2012. So we got a tractor trailer here and just did a quick visual, and first thing I noticed is the wetness and oil right there at that. And when I use my UV light, I could see a little bit of green, so I know somebody stuck tracer dye in there. Before I remove the cap, I try to see if I could pick up anything. There might be nothing in here, but I try to see if it's leaking before I disturb it. I want to know if this thing is filled with refrigerant and I pick up a leak, I know this is leaking. But if it's empty, you know, I'm not going to pick up nothing. And as you can see, it's picking up nothing. So I'm going to go around this with visual, and I'm now going to check it, see if it has pressure in it, because now I could disturb that cap because I already tested it and I know it's not leaking right now. That doesn't mean it won't leak. If you started running this, the metal gets cold, the rubber gets cold, the valve core gets cold. It could be leaking only when it's running and it gets cold, and then when it gets warm and it gets a higher pressure, it stops leaking. Leaks are not always continuous. Look for where they're rubbing through. Check this out. 2 pieces of rubber are rubbing right here. Let's see if I could get that. Do you see that wear mark, that divot right there in the rubber hose? There's the rubber hose. You see, that's not pressed down, that's actually worn away rubber. 2 pieces of rubber rubbing together through vibration, and the dust and the fiber in there acts as a sandpaper, and it eats away rubber to rubber until one finally eventually leaks. Same sometimes like this. You see this little piece of rubber on the metal? Sometimes you can have rubber rubbing on metal and it'll literally rub a hole through the metal. The rubber wins. When rubber touches metal, rubber wins. So we're looking at some rust right here. Now usually receiver dryers, when they rust at the welds, they could rust through pinholes at the welds because welds are usually dirty, overheated, there's carbon in them, and then that's where they'll rust at the weld. So I'll check that. I'm gonna go over all the hoses. You have the drain line right down here. So I pinched the drain line, make sure there's no leaves coming out there. It has full flow for airflow because the fresh air goes through here, but so does dirt and leaves and stuff, and sometimes you can plug this whole thing up. We're gonna wanna check for plug filters, and electrically, always test the compressor, spin it by your hand. Nice and smooth all the way around. Give it several rotations. Not a lot of slop. Look at the gap. The gap is, without looking up the specifications, it's not a big gap, but I know it's getting up there. Let's see if I could zoom in on this and give you something a little. That is becoming a big gap right there. So it's coming up on time where you would have to look up the specifications, because a wide gap on hot days and a hot field coil can cause intermittent cooling, where it cools for the first 15 or 20 minutes. The first time the clutch kicks out, now it's hot, it has a weak magnet, and it goes to kick back in and it doesn't kick in. So that would give you intermittent problems. And I got to get over here to look at the condenser. Yeah, I'm gonna have to climb up here, and I'm still in my leg brace, so I have to climb up all this and look over at that condenser, and then get under the dash at the cabin air filter. And this is a Freightliner. All right, so that's just giving you overall my visual inspection that I'm gonna do. You also have to make sure that the pressure switch is engaging the clutch, because these are on electric clutches, and sometimes the clutch might not be coming on. It goes up to 400 psi, and that's the cause of no cooling. So I just walked up on this vehicle having no information and no prior experience with this vehicle. All right guys, I'll see you next video on this vehicle.